All right, today we're going to dive into a truly wild business story. The rise, the spectacular fall, and the absolutely stunning rebirth of Erickson Senior Living. Seriously, it's a tale of revolutionary ideas, a fatal flaw, and a comeback that basically reshaped an entire industry.
So here's the central puzzle, right? How on earth does a company that completely cracked the code for an entire generation end up in bankruptcy court, only to somehow emerge from the ashes stronger and more influential than it ever was? That's the question we're going to unpack.
So to understand this, we got to rewind the clock. Our story begins back in the 1980s with this massive societal problem that, almost everyone was just ignoring. The company's founder, John Erickson, he saw something that the rest of the industry had totally missed.
Back then, the reality for seniors was pretty stark. You basically had two options. On one hand, you had these kind of sterile, government-funded nursing homes. On the other, you had incredibly expensive, exclusive communities for the super wealthy. There was just this massive gap right down the middle.
And this gap, this is what Erickson called the middle market. Just think about your retired teachers, firefighters, government workers. These folks weren't poor, not at all. They owned their homes, which had been going up in value for decades, but they didn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars just sitting in the bank. They were what you'd call asset rich, but cash poor, and nobody was building for them.
So Erickson comes up with a solution. And it wasn't just, a new type of building. It was a completely new financial engine. This one innovation would fuel one of the most explosive growth stories in American real estate.
Okay, this right here was the absolute masterstroke. Instead of charging a massive, non-refundable fee that you'd never see again, Erickson created the 100% refundable entrance deposit. Essentially, residents were giving the company an interest-free loan, which they were guaranteed to get back. This was a total game changer.
Let's just walk through how this worked, because the appeal was pure genius. You'd sell the family home you bought for maybe $30,000 in the 60s for, let's say, $400,000 in the 2000s. You'd give Erickson a $300,000 deposit, you'd live in this beautiful community, and then when you passed away, your kids got the entire $300,000 back.
So you see the crucial point here. It was this incredible psychological shift. The old model made retirement living a massive expense that basically just drained your family's inheritance. Erickson's model? It transformed it into a strategy to preserve that inheritance. It removed the single biggest fear for middle-class seniors, and the floodgates just opened.
And the result of all this? Man, Erickson just went into overdrive. They used this standardized cookie-cutter approach to build these massive campuses at an incredible speed. Each new community was funded by the deposits from the residents of the last one. It was like a perpetual motion machine, all fueled by the ever-rising U.S. housing market. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, it turns out that when your entire empire is built on a single assumption, you're incredibly vulnerable. And in 2008, that one single assumption was about to be completely obliterated.
This was the fatal flaw, the Achilles heel. The whole system, the expansion, the debt repayment, literally everything, it only worked if seniors could sell their homes quickly and for a good price. For decades, that was a pretty safe bet, but it wasn't a guarantee.
This quote from John Erickson himself it's just haunting. When the housing market crashed, the very asset that was supposed to liberate seniors, their home, suddenly became a prison. They couldn't sell it, so they couldn't move. They were just trapped.
So Erickson gets hit by this perfect storm. The pipeline of new residents and their money, those entrance fees, it dried up almost overnight. And at the exact same moment, the credit markets froze solid. Banks refused to refinance the huge construction loans Erickson had taken out. The perpetual motion machine just ground to a violent halt.
And then, the inevitable. On October 19, 2009, the unthinkable happened. The titan of senior living, the company that had solved the riddle of the middle market, was bankrupt.
But this is not where the story ends. Actually, for the company, it was a brutal but necessary new beginning, because out of the bankruptcy proceedings, a surprising hero emerged.
In the auction for what was left of the company, there were two very different visions for the future. On one side, you had the private equity giant KKR, known for focusing on short-term returns. On the other, you had Redwood Capital, a private family office designed for long-term stable investments. The company was literally at a crossroads.
In the end, Redwood Capital won the bidding. For $365 million, they purchased the core of what was left of the Erickson empire. And they weren't looking to flip it, they were looking to rebuild it, but this time on a much more stable foundation. In fact, John Erickson himself called them a white knight.
The first big move under new ownership was a really smart rebrand. They dropped the word retirement, which was seen as kind of passive and old-fashioned, and became Erickson Living. This was a clear signal that they were now targeting the more active, younger baby boomer generation.
But look, this was way more than just a rescue mission. What emerged from the bankruptcy wasn't just a leaner version of the old company. No, it was a fundamentally different and far more resilient kind of organization.
The pivot under the new owners was just comprehensive. You can see Erickson was no longer solely reliant on risky bank debt. It was now backed by stable, long-term capital. The entrance fee model was tweaked a bit to generate more revenue, but the biggest change, by far, was in healthcare.
This was the masterstroke of the new era. Erickson created its very own Medicare Advantage plan. Now, why is this so crucial? Because it completely aligns the company's financial incentives with the health of its residents. Think about it. They make more money when residents stay healthy and out of the hospital. They've integrated the housing, the doctors, and the insurance into one seamless system.
And the results? Well, they speak for themselves. From the ashes of that 2009 bankruptcy, the company has absolutely roared back. Today, Erickson Senior Living is the fourth largest provider in the entire country.
The scale of this comeback is just staggering. Today, we're talking about over 30,000 residents living in 25 massive communities, supported by a workforce of more than 17,000 people. It's a true giant, and honestly, bigger and more financially stable than the original company ever was.
So, we have to end with this question. Erickson survived its near-death experience by transforming from a real estate developer into this vertically integrated health and housing platform. So, is this highly controlled, all-in-one ecosystem the blueprint for how millions of Americans will age in the decades to come? It's an incredibly powerful model, and it's one that will surely shape the future.